Okay, hey there. Here's another board policy video. I know you've been dying and waiting for the sequel from last time. You've got your popcorn already. This video, I'm going to review policy 7510, which is about different types of leave and how you may or may not take them, and policy 7130, which is about licensure. I looked at the sign-off sheets in the workroom, and it looks like maybe a little over half of everybody here has watched those last videos and signed off. I'm going to do a little email to the folks who haven't done that yet. I think we're in the last week of January, so if you could try to get that done. If you haven't watched those yet, stop this video, go back and watch those from the last board meeting, the December board meeting, before you go on with these, and that way you won't fall behind. You can try to kind of keep up with everything. All right, leave. Even though I'm going to go over this, anytime you have questions about how to take some sort of leave, just ask me, ask Mrs. Graves, and we will answer it, or we'll find out the answer and let you know. In this policy, there's a lot of philosophical stuff up here at the top that I'm going to skip. I'm going to start with B here, which is about continuous leave of more than 10 days. So if you're going to take 10 consecutive days of any kind of leave, that has to be approved. And it talks about the family and medical leave for any continuous leave of more than 10 days. Now, sometimes there's a misconception about that because there is no like bank of leave that's called family and medical leave. The Family and Medical Leave Act, or way of approving it, basically just means holding your position, holding your job forever how long you have to be out. The only actual leave you have is whatever leave you have accumulated, which in most situations would be your sick leave and maybe sometimes annual leave. So if you have a baby, or your spouse, your wife has a baby, then you can take, leave. You can take maternity leave, but there is no maternity leave. You would be taking sick leave or annual leave. So that always has to be approved. Down here, sick leave is element C, and it says that the superintendent or designee may require a statement from a medical doctor as proof that the employee was unable to work. I think that would be in rare situations, because most of the time you're just sick. You're not going to the doctor. I can only see that coming up, and if there's something unusual about the leave, rather the duration or the frequency of it. Sometimes people give me that. I've never asked for it, but sometimes people will give me a note from their doctor. I got a note from urgent care when I was out was it 4 days? 4 days or 5 days with COVID and strep, and nobody asked me for it, but I just went ahead and sent it to the superintendent. Personal leave must be used in half or whole day units. So personal leave, I think that's one of those things that we don't accumulate very much of. You might accumulate 1 or 2 days in a year. In order to take that, you have to take it either in a half day or a whole day. You can't say, well, I want to take a couple of hours of personal leave. When it's a situation like you've got an appointment or whatever, talk with me about that, and we'll see what we can work out. Because again, if you're going to take personal leave, it's got to be either a whole day or a half day. Talks about vacation leave here. I'm not even sure what that is. There's several things in this policy that I've never heard of. Maybe they just haven't come up. But vacation leave, it's not real clear what it is, but it's kind of up to the superintendent. I'm just going to move on from that. If you have questions about vacation leave, I don't know. Let me know and we'll investigate further. Then it talks about compensatory leave, which is comp time. Only non-certified folks earn comp time. Folks like your custodians, teacher assistants, folks like that, cafeteria workers, they earn comp time anytime they work over the 40 hours in a week. And it talks about that being described in policy 7500. So there's a lot more information about comp time and the workday in policy 7500. It says that supervisors shall arrange for employees to take comp time prior to the end of the fiscal year if possible. So what that's saying is you are encouraged not to carry over your comp time. You're encouraged to use it in the year that you accrued it, if at all possible. It says, except when deemed necessary for the proper administration of the school system. So Mrs. Graves, for example, rather than saying, hey, take all that now, there might be a situation where I want to ask her to take it at a specific time so that then she can be here at a time she normally wouldn't have been here, like maybe sometime in July, and we need to get the schedule in there or something like that. But outside of some reason like that, which again is for the benefit of the school or school system, everybody should take all their comp time prior to the end of the year if possible, the fiscal year, which ends on June 30th. An employee that has a balance of comp time available, that time will be used first for all periods of authorized absence. So if you have comp time and you're going to be out, you may say, well, I want to take a sick day, or I want to take a personal day, or I want to take an annual leave day. Non-certified folks can take annual leave days on required work days, unlike certified people who cannot. But if you're non-certified and you have comp time, that always has to be taken first. For several years, they told data managers like Mrs. Graves, payroll managers, always just take it. If no matter what kind of request they give you, take their comp time first. At the last principals meeting, they changed that and said that data managers should no longer do that. But if they receive a request from anybody who has comp time and they're requesting to use any other type of leave, they should tell the principal. The principal then should go have a discussion with that person and say, you have to take your comp time first, redo your request, or whatever needs to be done from there. But they kind of put it on the principal to make that decision and inform that person. This element G here talks about leave to teach at a charter, regional, or lab school. One of those things I've never heard of. Says that request must be provided at least 45 days before the teacher would otherwise have to report for duty at that other school. Hopefully you're not all, or any of you, hopefully none of you are like Googling, how do I teach at a lab school? Get me out of here kind of thing. But I've never heard of that, but apparently that's a thing. I'm not sure if you would be paid during that kind of leave of absence. It doesn't really say. I'm thinking probably not. I'm thinking that would be like you would be paid by that other school, and this would somehow be for your professional development, and you would bring back what you learned to the regular public school. That's all my speculation there. And again, that the leave would just be holding your position rather than compensating you while you were gone. Discretionary leave or absence without pay. That's something that sometimes, unfortunately, folks have to do. If they've used all their annual leave, sick leave, and things like that, we can approve just absence without pay. And so it kind of holds the position. This is surprising. It can be, with the superintendent's approval, it can be for up to a period of 1 calendar year. That really surprised me. I think it would have to be an unusual situation and maybe something, again, that was going to benefit you in terms of your performance. But anyway, that's a thing that you can do that up for a year. You wouldn't be paid, but they would hold your position if the superintendent approved it. This is interesting. If you do that kind of thing and you say, I'm going to be out from June 1st to December 18th, it says that you couldn't change that, like come back early, unless both parties agreed to that. So if, the school system had somebody else in place and they wanted them to finish out that term, that would be something important to think about. You can't just change your mind in the middle of that leave. You can request for that and, probably it would be approved, but both parties do have to agree. Otherwise, it's got to be whatever was originally requested. Separation from employment. This is talking about that comp time, and probably a lot of folks have heard the magic 240 hours. No one should have more than 240 hours at a time. If they reach that 240 mark, they should just immediately take some comp time and get that down and try to get more of that used. One reason for that is if you were terminated or somehow your employment ended suddenly, the school system would have to pay you a lump sum. It says not to exceed a maximum of 30 days, which is 240 hours, upon separation from service. Now, interesting, the opposite also applies. If you had gone into a negative balance of leave time and then your employment suddenly ended, a deduction in the appropriate amount would be taken out of your paycheck. So the system would have to pay you if you had kind of a surplus of that. You would have to pay the system if you had a negative of that. Almost finished with this policy. Here's another thing I didn't know is that if the employee, God forbid, is deceased, that leave that wasn't used has to be paid out to, it says, the employee's administrator or executor upon the establishment of a valid claim. Now, someone would have to make that claim, it says, to the clerk of superior court in the county of the deceased employee's residence. I had no idea. So, not a good thing to think about, but if you wanted to, you could tell your loved ones, your spouse, hey, if anything happens to me, I have some leave time. You need to look into that. You need to talk with the clerk of superior court and file a claim so that the school system pays you or whomever, the beneficiary, whoever you would want that to be, for my unused leave. That's kind of interesting. Not in the policy, but just in terms of payroll, Mrs. Graves does our payroll. Shonda Bias is the district payroll manager. So if you didn't know who that person was, because we've had some changes in district, in central office, that's who does that. That was leave time. Now I'm going to talk about licensure. I'll start the way I ended with that one. Jennifer Cable is the person at central office who is over licensure. So questions about CEUs and renewals and what kind of license you have and all those things relating to licensure ultimately go to her if we can't answer them. A lot of kind of general philosophical stuff up here at the top. A lot of this is about extenuating circumstances that would allow a person without a license to teach. It could just be a position that there seems to be no way to fill, kind of a teacher shortage situation. Someone might be put in that role then without an actual teaching license. Under exceptions to licensure requirements, B is all about CTE. CTE is career technical explorations, I think. So like Mrs. Garst is a CTE teacher. Mrs. Graves used to be a CTE teacher. A lot of times you do have kind of a lateral entry into that. Somebody from the business world, for example, might teach business classes. Somebody who was an auto mechanic or a carpenter, they might teach those kinds of classes. And they do have to take some education courses, and they do have to pass some tests and things, but it's a little different. It's a little bit easier to kind of come in, get that CTE license, and then build upon that. But they can work up to 20 hours per week for 5 full consecutive months of employment, provided they complete pre-service training and meet all other statutory requirements. Down below there, it's talking about adjunct instructors and core subjects, and it talks about the fine arts. It says that someone from a higher education institution, somebody who was a professor at a college, even if they don't have a certain specific license to teach in a K-12 setting, they can do that as long as certain things are met. Same thing on down there, a person with a bachelor's degree or graduate degree in a certain area, even if they don't have the license to go with it, they could go ahead and start teaching. Again, it kind of depends on the situation. All that type of stuff would have to be cleared by Jennifer Cable and Kim Gibson, folks like that. This is interesting. 4, it's about teaching the Cherokee language. That's something that could happen if you knew how to teach the Cherokee language. you wouldn't necessarily have to have a teaching license to do that. That's interesting. Driver's education, you got to have a driver's license, and then there's specific classes. You have to have certified driver training in order to teach driver's ed. Beginning teacher program is down here, which is everybody's first 3 years once they get the initial license. Some people, going back to that idea of kind of easing in, some people sometimes start off as a TA, but once they get that initial license, then they have 3 years as a beginning teacher. This part talks about how the district must have a beginning teacher program, and those people must participate for those 3 years. At the end of the 3 years, that's when the school level administration and the district would decide, should we recommend this person for moving from that initial license to the standard 2 professional teaching license. I like to think of that as kind of the gateway right there. And you decide in those 3 years or not, is this teacher going to be a good teacher? And if not, that's the time to say, hey, you're great. We love you as a person, but you maybe want to do something else, rather than getting on in further into that when that process can become more difficult for everybody involved. I kind of went down a rabbit hole there, but that's the BT program in a nutshell. Here's another thing I never heard of, a lifetime license. That sounds cool. I want a lifetime license, but I've never heard of it. But it talks about a lifetime license. And over here on the last page, it even goes so far as to say that if you have that lifetime license, you don't have to earn CEUs, although the superintendent can require you to go to certain professional development. So I don't know. Next time I see Jennifer Cable, I'm going to say, hey, what's a lifetime license, and why didn't anybody offer me one? Never heard of that. License renewal is the responsibility of the individual. Jennifer Cable, me, people like that, we will remind you, but if you're up for renewal, it's ultimately your responsibility to send in the $50 or $75, whatever it is now, to renew your license every 5 years. If you drop the ball on that, there's really nobody to blame. It's your responsibility. You can try to get it reinstated if that were to happen, but of course the thing to do is be on top of it. If you ever have any questions about how to renew your license, let me or Mrs. Lugowitz know. F here is about parental notification. It says that all Title I schools shall notify parents or guardians of each student that they have the right to request the following information. And it goes on to talk about the qualifications of their child's teacher. Does that teacher have North Carolina qualifications and licensure for that particular grade and subject area? They can even ask about the paraprofessional or teacher assistant. What is her or his qualifications? Which in Cherokee County, you have to have at least an associate's degree to be a teacher assistant. It doesn't say that we have to send that information out. We just have to let them know that they have the right to request that information. So Mrs. Lugowitz and I will talk about how to do that. She's our Title I crate person, keeps track of all that stuff, does a phenomenal job. And maybe we can do that on our website. Maybe we can add that to our other Title I information that we hand out at the beginning of the year. This last part is about equitable distribution of teachers. It talks about how the superintendent has to make sure that the quality and qualifications of the teachers is even, especially in areas where there might be like high poverty or minorities or people with disabilities, that those teachers can't be like the bottom of the barrel teachers. And if you paid attention, I went through a big thing that Jennifer Cable sent a while back and kind of looked at the district as a whole. And if you just kind of looked at it on the surface, it could look like, it looks like all the newest teachers are placed at Andrews. I remember that was one thing, that was kind of one misinterpretation you could draw. Another one could be about the diversity, but when you dug a little deeper, the school with the least diversity among student population, which I think was Hiawassee Dam, there was no issue with their teacher qualifications or teacher performance. Actually, we were looking not at qualifications, we were looking at performance and years of experience, I believe. Same thing, when you really looked at it, you could see that what was going on in Andrews was just part of that cycle right now we have a lot of veteran teachers, but a few years down the road, maybe 5 or 6 years down the road, we'll probably have a lot of BTs, because a lot of the experienced teachers will then have, reached retirement. That was all about licensure 7130. Hope you found that enlightening. If you have any questions about either of those policies, let me know. The other policies that were approved or amended for the last meeting, January meeting, we had administering medicine to students. I'm going to ask Mrs. Decker if she would please be responsible for that, whether she does a video or an email, or how it is that she reviews that with you somehow. Then we have student records. I probably will do a video about that, or maybe Mrs. Lugowitz will do a video about that. We'll see. And I'm not going to do board meetings, because I just don't think anybody other than the board members really need to have that policy reviewed. But you can read it if you want to. We'll put all these policies in the workroom. Thank you for watching this. I will make a sign-off sheet. This time, rather than doing a sheet for each policy, I may just do one sheet and put them all, 7130, 7510, the medication one, just put them all on one sign-off sheet, so that you're saying, hey, I watched all these videos, or I reviewed all this policy stuff. I am good to go and well informed. Thank you for watching.